I'm Abubakar Salim.
It's December of 2023 and a tall man with an English accent is standing on a stage in central Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. Sorry, no, this is crazy, man.
As he looks into the camera, he's wearing a traditional Western black suit, but half of it is covered by a vibrantly coloured shawl of African origin.
I mean, I remember watching the Game Awards when I was younger, so being up here now is like...
On the shawl, there's a picture of a child with a hand on his shoulder. A father figure stands behind the boy. His face is gold, fixed, godlike.
So the reason I'm here tonight is because with the love and support of a lot of people here, I'm going to take another big risk and I'm going to show you what we've been building. A game from my old man. I hope you like it.
Hello and welcome to Dear Dwyery, the podcast about the people who play and make video games. I'm your host, Danny O'Dwyer. Abubakar Salim has accomplished a lot in his short career, an actor in both Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves series and the most recent series of House of the Dragon. Abubakar has also lended his acting talents to the world of video games, voicing Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins, as well as characters in World of Warcraft, Diablo, and Xenoblade Chronicles. But he didn't stop there. Abubakar's Surgent Studios developed Tales of Kenzera Zhao, which was released earlier this year, a Metroidvania-style platformer inspired by his personal experience of losing his father. Of course, none of these careers happened overnight or came easy. This is a story with plenty of ups and downs. So how about we start by establishing the most important foundation, his gaming one. What were the games you played growing up? What was your first machine?
Oh man, it was the Mega Drive from earliest recollection, Sega Mega Drive. Playing Sonic the Hedgehog on that, which was great fun. That I would say is like my earliest memory. I'd also say Golden Axe.
Oh yeah.
Yo, Golden Axe, what a game. Definitely was very, very early memories of playing those, yeah.
Did you have any siblings you had to fight off the machine, or?
No, I didn't really. I was, I do have an older sister, but she was like, by the time I was born, she already had like a kid and and everything. So I was kind of brought up almost like an only child. So yeah, so it was just me, man. Like I my dad would play with me every now and then, and I had cousins and stuff, like big kind of African family. You get lots of lots of cousins and people wanting to play as well. But like ultimately it was just me, man. It was just me and my machine. It was great.
I read as well that your father was a software engineer. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. He worked at Xerox. So he was a software engineer for printers and stuff, which is great. It's amazing, So we'd get all these like different like printers and photocopy machines which would kind of lounge around and stuff, and which was hilarious. I found them fascinating because it allowed me to, because I never really had posters when I was growing up. It was one of those households where it was my mum was like, no, we don't need posters. It just damages the wall. It's weird. So I would print out essentially like I'd like Google like Yu-Gi-Oh or Google like Action Man, and I'd print them out and I'd like stick them on my wall and be like, that's my poster, for the short moments until my mum realized it and she was like, this is terrible, and then she'd take it down.
Is it black and white or full color or?
Yeah, most of the time it was black and white because my dad was like, color's expensive.
So, like, was he more, I guess, predisposed to allowing you to mess around with technology, or?
Yeah, I think because of his exposure to it and, his sort of where he was working, it was very normal for there to be like, tech around the space and him loving tech, right? I remember even like he had this like portable TV that I would always like fiddle around, that you'd have to find like the channels on, and
wow.
And he was always trying to be on top of like the latest gadget, either be it like a cooking gadget, and which is probably where I got like my love for cooking, even though he was a terrible cook, or like it was with games. It was something that he was really, I guess he was fascinated by the art of it all, rather than necessarily like a gamer himself as a whole.
Yeah, sounds like a curious man when it came to that.
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
he was curious, and it wasn't a curiosity where he would always be asking why. He would just want to dig in himself and learn why. And I think like that's kind of where my love for games and pushing through and trying to figure out like what works, what doesn't has come from, you know. It's just through this curiosity of wanting to sort of create and build.
What else were you curious about? Like as a kid, were you know, I'm assuming with your career path that you were interested and involved in lots of things. Were you a sporty kid? Were you instantly a drama kid?
I wasn't really into sports too much. I mean, I played basketball at school a lot.
Was that just because you were taller than everyone? Like they made you do it?
Like so. This is it. So this is why this is happening, right? You end up finding yourself doing sports that you didn't really like. For example, basketball. I was taller than quite a lot of people, so it just made sense.
They were typecasting you immediately.
Basically,
right.
Did rugby because I was like big kid. Like I could charge through, the kids in like year 11 when I was in year 7. So like I was just an absolute tank. Again, didn't like it, but the idea of being, they'd always give me the ball because they'd know I'd be able to 9 times out of 10 just plow through these poor kids. As a whole. Did shot put, which was good fun.
Oh, wow.
And I actually was so funny. I think to this day, a mate of mine pointed out that I still hold like the record for like the shot put for school for a certain year, which is hilarious. Again, purely down to the fact that I was quite a big kid when I was younger, but I was into martial arts, so that was something that both my dad and myself were really into. My dad did a lot of Tai Chi, and I did jiu-jitsu for like 10 years.
Oh wow! Before it blew up as well, because now jiu-jitsu is such a
jiu-jitsu is like loved everywhere. And it's like that's Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. Mine was Kempo, so it was different. Did quite a bit of weapon work as well. Like so, I guess I was into the movement of the body. I would say in an interesting and artistic way, not necessarily in a sporty way, in a competitive way. It was more so about the discipline of the self, and I think that sort of naturally led me into acting, which kind of again it was active, it was on my feet, but it wasn't competitive. It was purely play, and I think like that was something that my dad could see as well, and something that I really enjoyed. This idea of being all these different characters and still coming back home to being who I am. But in truth, like games have always been a part of my life. From the get go, it was always I remember playing World of Warcraft for years.
Were you Horde or Alliance in World of Warcraft? I feel like that's an important question.
I mean, I know it is, and I feel really cheap saying it, but I'm gonna give some backup story here. So look, I love Arthas. I think Arthas is really cool, and I wanted to be like Arthas, so I was a human paladin, which everyone I realized was back in the day.
I was a dwarf paladin, but I feel like that's the Irish version of a human paladin.
That's fantastic. So this is it. So yeah, but then I had a story in my mind, and this was before the Wrath of the Lich King expansion came out, because I kind of dropped off afterwards. But I had a story in my mind that the best way to become a Death Knight is to become an undead warrior. So that's essentially, I went to Horde at the end of it all, which was good fun. Yeah,
check out the Undercity. You've had enough of Elwyn Forest.
I know, man. It was always the same things, but yeah, it was really cool. It was good fun, and I'd always play on the role playing servers.
Oh, really?
Great fun. Yeah. I'd always play on the role playing servers because I enjoyed the kind of the text based role play, because it was something that I felt, again, it was just acting in my eyes. Right. So it was just really, really cool to kind of do and fun to play.
What was your character's name? You have to tell me now.
Oh, man.
Remember? It's hard.
Yeah, I can't. You know what? I can't remember. I think I know, because it's a name I use a lot. I've had a few characters. I've had since then orcs and Taurens as well. But the one name I'd always return to, which is something that I also use in some of my tabletop role plays, is Valkos. So that was my character's name.
Does it mean anything, or does it just sound cool?
Nah, it just sounds dope, man. It was there was a game. I don't know if you can remember it. It was a game. I think it was called Vex. I think the game was called Vex.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, Vex is a cool name. But then I was like, but everyone's going to think I'm like some, animal sort of crazy dark thing. So I'm just going to call him Valkos. And I was like, yeah, that's dope. That's a great name. So yeah, I've been running with that since. Yeah, so games have always had a massive impact on me throughout as I was, doing all this stuff with martial arts and getting and tearing into kids as a young man.
So how did you choose acting? And then how did you, what was the pipeline like? Because obviously growing up in England, there are some pipelines, but getting access to them is a big thing.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I grew up in Hertfordshire, which, it was, when I look back at it now, I'm like, actually, it was really, really dope. It was nice. It was lovely, even though it was, there was quite a bit of racism every now and then, but it's what it is. But in regards to sort of, knowing what I wanted to do, it's funny. I didn't really have direction. Obviously I was thinking, my mum and dad, they were like, you're going to go to uni and you're going to, you're going to study, did all this sort of stuff and everything. But, for me, there was something about acting where I was like, oh, this is something that if I can make a career out of this is going to be great. But I didn't know where to start. So I auditioned for the National Youth Theatre, which is like this charity out here in England where, essentially it helps young actors, want to essentially, do really cool stuff. Chiwetel Ejiofor was part of it. I think Johnny Lee Miller did it as well. Like quite a few big actors who of today were part of this thing, right? And I remember at the time saying to myself, like, if I audition for this, if I don't get in the first time, I'm just going to go join the army, because I'm, one thing that I know that I like is this sense of discipline, regiment, structure, direction, right? But I luckily got in and I've been acting ever since.
Wow, sliding doors moment.
It really was, man, because it was again, and I remember at the time thinking to myself, okay, I'm serious now, because I genuinely, I was like, what, like 14, 15 at the time? And I didn't like this idea of feeling of like, I don't know what I really want to do. I don't know where I want to do or what I want to be, And so, yeah, it just really, it was that moment of, sliding doors, of being like, yeah, it's either I'm going to be an actor for the rest of my life, or I am just going to probably just go join the army. And yeah, that was, thank God that teacher said yes to me, because it's led me to where I am today.
That road then, as an actor, I'm sure there was ups and downs in it. Did you ever have crises of, conscious of like, I made the right decision, or did it always feel like the right path?
No, it always felt like the right path. But, I think I've been very lucky in regards to that. Because I've worked with a lot of other actors as well who've been trying it for years and trying different things for years and, being in the career for years and having all those ups and downs. And don't get me wrong, there have been ups and downs in the sense that, like, I've had moments where I haven't worked for like, a couple of months or like a year. You don't know when your next paycheck is going to come, right?
Right.
Which is part of the stress of being an actor. It's all on you. You're only as good as the last job you've done. But the I think the thing with me and I'm I'm learning about it now, it's like I'm very stubborn, and I will not take no as an answer. And so if I'm not having something done, or if I'm not working, for example, I'd make my own work. So I'd write, short films and kind of conjure up ideas with friends and whatnot, and think of like cool story moments, or, and then I'm working, and then I'm like, great, I'm in the workflow of it. But then I want to also write and be inspired and ask questions about like, how is it all happening? And I think that's just always been sort of me. And I was very lucky, as I said, like after National Youth Theatre, I did the whole drama school shtick, did that for 3 years, was very fortunate to have, auditioned for that, got a scholarship to that, did the 3-year scholarship with that. And then coming out of the bat, had a good agent, and to an agent who I'm still with today, like, and, working consistently since. And it's just been I've been really blessed on that front. I've always been an actor, and especially from where I come from, and the, not only the financial difficulties of where we were, but also the, just who I am. I feel very fortunate and very blessed to be where I am, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Because it's very easy to sort of not have what I've had. And there's simply nothing to do with you. It's just circumstance.
Right. Is there like a survivor guilt thing with that, when you went through years and years of drama school and all of these youth theater things, and then when you're one of the ones that makes it, is there sort of a feeling of
it? No, yes and no. I'd say more so no than anything, because I don't think it's really guilt. It's a sense of like actual responsibility I do feel in regards to being like, right, so how do I make this opportunity or these chances better for other people who want to chase and go for their dreams. So, I do a lot of like masterclasses and talks, and anytime anyone wants to, ask for some advice, I'm like very open about it. Like I feel like it's important to share knowledge. I think because if it wasn't for the people who shared knowledge in the beginning with me, I wouldn't be where I am today. So like that's something that I really want to give back. So I think that's why it is. But also, I worked hard, man. Like I think that's also something that I kind of need to try and remember is like, I didn't just wake up and suddenly become an actor. It was a lot of work in regards to a lot of after school training, a lot of, kind of reading, did a lot of reading, a lot of play reading, lots of, other books of reading, practitioner reading, studying, man, like learning about the craft and where it comes from in order to feel like, yeah, okay, I'm knowledgeable in this. So yeah, I would say that's really one of the key things that I have taken with me in regards to this. It's like, it's not a sense of feeling like survivor's guilt, but it's a feeling of like, actually, now you can give back, you should give back.
Abubakar landed the role of the protagonist in 2017's Assassin's Creed Origins.
I am a Magi, protector of Egypt.
Up to this point, he'd been getting by on a series of smaller TV roles and voice acting gigs, but this would be the first time he led a global franchise, and it really doesn't get much more global than a new Assassin's Creed title. It was a high-pressure situation for any actor. Abubakar was determined to not only get the best out of the part, but also use his time working with Ubisoft to soak up as much knowledge about game development as he could. So tell us again, then I guess, where did the grain of, okay, I'm going to get into game dev with this thing? Because it's quite a, short film is one thing, but...
Yeah, I know, right? I think it was COVID, man. I think I caught COVID and it did something to my brain and it made me think that I could be a game dev.
Your long COVID is a desire to be a dev.
Desire to be in the most volatile industry in the world. Again, I think, and I say this like all the time, like if I knew you could have a career in games when I was growing up, I probably would have been in game dev from the get-go, because it's always been a passion and love of mine. Films and TV and theater comes like second to games. It's like, it really is something that I've enjoyed and loved. And I think for me, the real moment or reality that hit me with it all of like, oh yeah, you could have a career in games, was when I did Assassin's Creed Origins and was playing Bayek. And I used to, like, it's funny, we were filming in Montreal, and the space where we were filming was very different to the Ubisoft main office. So the Ubisoft main office was, in town. The warehouse we were filming was out, wherever. But after we'd film, I'd be like, right, I'm going to the office, guys, and wait at the security to be let in so I could test the game.
Wow. And
just essentially and ask as many questions as I can to the developers, because to me, in my eyes, this was the dream. Like, what, turning up to work to make a video game? Like that's dope. Little did I know, it is not as simple as that.
My brother Septimius killed your son, and I don't give a shit.
Shit giving is my job.
But like that was the moment where I was like, you can have a career in this. Like there are real people who are making these things who enjoy and love what they do. And that was the one thing that really stuck out for me. Every time when I spoke to someone about like, making the game or being in the games industry, there was a sense of love for it that didn't feel like they were just clocking in and clocking off. which, not to say that you get that in the film space, but you kind of do get that in the film space.
A little bit, yeah.
You know, a lot of people are like, you know, are there because like, yeah, I'm just rigging, or yeah, I'm just building, or like there's a clock on, clock off mentality. Whereas in games, there is a passion behind it, and I think that was really inspiring. Because again, I'm just inspired by a sense of like, if you were enjoying what you do, you know.
I'm fascinated by the idea that you were sort of creatively collaborating with Ubisoft, because I did wonder when you were working on that, like obviously Bayek lives large in that game. There are thousands of lines of dialogue. And I was thinking like when you're acting, presumably if you're working with the director, there's space for you to do some sort of improvisation, even not with the dialogue, even just like physically or in the delivery of the lines, even if you're not changing them. Presumably when you're doing voice work for a game, it's fairly rigid in like what you're saying. Is that the case? But it sounds like you still were able to be involved sort of deeper than that as well.
Oh, 100%. And it was important to be. I think it's important to give something of yourself to whatever you do, because people realize that, like people get that, they feel that, and they react to that, you know. And I think like that's important. And so, especially when it came to playing Bayek, it was one of those moments where, again, leading. It was the first time I was leading something, the first time I was ever, you know, playing such a huge role in something. It also felt like, because I am a massive Assassin's Creed fan, I knew the lore, I knew everything in and out. So I had that sort of meta also kind of look at it and take on it, which really helped in capturing the tone, the essence of it, knowing like, you know, because a lot of it I was thinking like, if I was playing this, what would I want from my protagonist, or what would I want from my hero? So yeah, it was really useful on that front. And you know, Ubi were welcoming on that. You know, they really they allowed me to engage with the game, and they ended up telling me like, you know, cool story plots and ideas and thoughts, because a lot of the time all this stuff is under strict NDA, but I think they could see the passion, and they could see like I know what you're talking about, so you can talk with me in short, you know, in shorthand really.
Was there an added element of pride, given that I know you're not Egyptian, but it's in the region of sort of Northeast Africa as well, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's funny again. Like I didn't think about it until it was mentioned, right? And I think like, but at the same time, there was a part of me that was like, hey, no, this is actually really cool. It's like, you know, this is an African game, you know? And I think that was what was really dope about it. And yeah, there was a sense of like, of pride and happiness with it. It was a sense of like, oh wow, this is real. Like this is like a thing. So yeah, man, like definitely a feeling of like this is, and also a feeling of fear, by the way, like huge, massive fear, anxiety, you know, galore, like to the point of, and I think it mattered a lot more because I really cared about Assassin's Creed.
Right.
Also, the film had come out while we were filming it, and the film was just, I mean, like, I know, so I know it's what it is, but it wasn't that great. But and so here I am thinking, oh great, it's the film of Assassin's Creed as a universe, and I'm going to be the one who kills it as a game.
You're twisting the knife. They stuck it in.
Oh man,
it didn't end up that way though. I mean,
no.
It's how do you feel after the release of the game? Did you play it then? Well, did you ruin the game for yourself because you'd already?
The thing is, I know, and that's the thing. I didn't, in the sense of like I'd played a lot of it, but when I'd finally got time to play it at home, and you know really enjoy it. I was playing, actually. My mum was watching me play it as we were going along. I still enjoyed every bit and moment of it, man. Like it was phenomenal. It was such a great. It felt incredible. Like it was such an incredible experience. Again, that whole love of games really sort of inspired that, you know, and and it really kind of it added just another level to the whole thing.
Obviously, since then, you've had great success in both television and film as well.
Pardon, my lord. If it'll please you, much to do.
They tell me that you're the one that dragged my body out of the sea.
It was only my duty.
I am indebted to you, Alan.
Is there ever a fear from an actor that you might get stuck in the world of voiceover. Is that a thing that exists within the industry? Because, you know, sometimes you kind of see it with some artists that, you know, don't break out of that.
Yeah, no, there is. I think there is and there isn't. I think it's a weird one because, again, the thing is, it's like being an actor, you're by sort of nature, you're designed to be adaptive. So you can do anything, right? You know, that's the beauty of it. Want to do theater? Absolutely. You can do film and TV, like sure thing. If you want to be an entertainer, go for it. Like a host, do it. You know, you can do these stuff. You can wear these different shoes. But a lot of the time with the industry that we're in, you know, you do deal with a lot of people where like they hear you in one thing and they're like, oh, he'd be great in the same exact thing, just in a different space, right? So the issue as well that I'm finding, which it's not so much so now, but it still is a problem, is the divide between film, TV, and games. Like it's huge, right? In the sense of there are so many incredibly talented voice actors out there, and even motion capture actors, right, who you rarely ever see on TV. And it's not that they don't have the skill set. They absolutely do, because they're telling incredible stories this way. But what you just notice is that all these establishments, a lot of the time, feel comfortable working with who they know and what they know, right? And I think like that's the issue, or that's the problem that we are sort of in. It's this sense of like, we don't wish to be pigeonholed, but we become pigeonholed.
Right.
And there is a fear that the more you do of something, the more, you know, the more you become of it. Like, I mean, look at me, like in my career, like in the sense that, you know, I was very fortunate to have done Bayek as Assassin's Creed, and I did a few games here and there, you know, and a bits here and there, but I did mostly TV. And I've been doing TV for a very long time. And like, as an actor, you're then thinking, right, I really want to do a film, man. You're still doing TV. And it's like, you know, and that's the thing. So you end up finding the medium in which you kind of play in, and to crack that like little wall is pretty tough. Like it's a thing. So yeah, I think there is definitely a fear in general. I'm not worried about it, and then that's solely because I'm just happy wherever I am, mate. Like as long as I can put food on the table, like grand. But it is, you know, I think as a career progression, it's tricky, man. It's tricky.
It's funny, we did a documentary on the video game Immortality last year, and we interviewed a bunch of the cast, and the same thing came up with like Malangaj and a bunch of them where they were even saying like, and they're literally acting in the game. Like that is not motion captured, that is their faces. That is their
faces, right? Yeah.
And they felt that same thing of trying to get into, sometimes they're just like, oh, you know, casting agents like, what's that? Immortality, is that? And they see the shot, you know, the footage of it or whatever, and then they go, oh, it's a video game.
This is it. It's just like not necessarily a stigma, but it's like it's the unknown, man. Like I think like that's the thing. It's one of those ones where, and it's funny. It's for such a booming and successful industry, it's quite gated. You know, it's like you're either with us or you're not, and it's like, and you get that feeling, and I think like that resonates and speaks to the wider audiences. And I feel like there is a sense of like, yeah, well, sure, okay, if you don't want me there, I won't be there, I guess. So like, you know what I mean? Like even the fact, like even when I look back at it and I'm thinking, yeah, I didn't know that you could have a career in games until I, you know, did a video game. And then as soon as you're in, the amount of knowledge is huge and the amount of sharing is vast, but it's only until you're in, right? You know? And I think like that's the thing, man. And so like, especially with and don't get me wrong, film and TV is the exact same, man. Like, you know, once you cracked it, it's a different story, but it's the cracking it which is the hard part.
The ambition also has taken you in the direction of, you know, business and creative direction. So, I mean, you said you were always sort of working when you weren't working, right? Is that where Surgent Studios sort of came from?
Yeah, it's always been a sense of wanting to tell my own story and like tell a story. I think it's important, you know, to anyway, because it's one of those ones where I've been a tool and an asset in regards to telling other people's stories. And I've always been like, oh, but there's this moment and that could be really cool, or been inspired by like, moments of working. And so, yeah, I've just wanted to not only have a voice, but also share that voice with friends. Like, I think that's what's been really crucial as well. Like, I've always been that type of person where, like, I want to work with friends all the time. Like, I think it's great fun. We're only on this world for a very short time. Like, we should be enjoying what we're doing on this earth. And so that's where it's all come from, and where Surgent was born. It was born with this idea, this mentality of, I have very creative and cool friends. Let's figure out something to work together with.
Surgent Studios was set up to be a media house that could cross the worlds of film, games, and emerging platforms. Their biggest project to date would be Tales of Kenzera Zhao, a Metroidvania platformer heavily inspired by the Bantu people, an ethno-linguistic grouping of various native peoples that stretch across the midriff of the African continent. Inspired in part by his time filming Raised by Wolves in South Africa and pulling from his own experience as the son of his Kenyan father, Abubakar would voice the game's main character, Zhao, who embarks on an epic quest in an effort to revive his deceased father. How did you then move on to, I guess, let's talk about Zhao and the particulars of this game. How did that all come together? Because obviously you're going to have to hire a bunch of people to do the work. It's a big investment. It's many years. How did all that sort of come together? Because again, it's a lot of business, a lot of economics, finances.
So yeah, I mean, again, I'm like, what, 20, 26, 27. And I'm thinking to myself, I want to make a video game. And, I'm like, this is everything I wanted to do in my life. Let's do it. And
most people download Unity when that happens.
Yeah, I know. I decided to open up a company in Company's House and start hiring people. So I started pulling from a lot of the people that I knew from Assassin's Creed Origins, and talking to a lot of people there and being like, look, how do you start a game? How do you start a game studio? Like, where do you start? Where do you begin? I have this idea, because the idea was born out of, I played, it was Ori and the Blind Forest on the Switch. And I've always wanted to tell this story about my journey and my experience of grief. And I'd written a pilot TV show, and it just didn't stick. There was something that was just missing. It wasn't resonating with me. It didn't feel honest. And it was only until a couple of years later where I was like, oh man, a game. Like, that could be really cool. And I was playing Ori, and getting over this specific section was the waterfall section. And it killed me several times. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is so pointless. But the thing is, it's like the only time I'd ever felt that way was when playing Sonic with my father. And it was like the casino level, the specific casino level. It was painful and torturous. Anyway, so then it dawned on me, like it just clicked, like, oh, I've got to, this is what this story needs to be. It needs to be a video game. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's just start asking questions. So I was asking producers and people, and Montreal is a big video game space, man. Like, there are tons of people starting out new, and all, it's very like rife of that, right? It's an artistic city. It's an artistic space. So that's really where it came from, and it started with me with this idea of this young kid going on a journey with death and trying to figure out like where they're at and what they're going through.
My story began at the end of a world I once knew.
And at the same time, I had no idea what it meant to make a game. All I knew is that if I get the right people who know how to make games, it will naturally happen. And so I ended up like messaging people on LinkedIn, on like Twitter, on ArtStation, just being like, hey, I'm the guy, I'm Bayek. Want to join me on making a video game? And it just sort of snowballed from there, man. Like there was many an evening where I would send like 300 emails out, like to just people across the internet, asking them essentially like, yeah, would you be interested in joining me in making a game? And we ended up getting to where we are now. Like it was through just hustling, man, just hustling.
What was the, I sure you can't get too deep into the financials, but just I'm interested from a perspective of video game publishing and direction and stuff. How did you guys sort of organize the company? Were these people hired? Was it like a co-op situation or?
So I'm one of those guys where essentially I don't really go out much, and I don't like spending money on things. I normally am kind of I keep myself to myself. Unless I really care about something, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to buy anything for the year. And it's funny, my wife is the one who forces me to have a new wardrobe whenever she has the chance. And but I'd saved up quite a bit of money, and I decided to and again, I don't recommend this for anyone at all. But I took the risk. I decided to just put my money where my mouth is and put all my savings into starting this thing. So I was hiring and hiring people off my own back, because I knew you can't ask people to do stuff, for free. It's difficult. And also at the same time, you've got to show that you care. And it's good to then, turn up and then, what I thought at the time, go to, like a publisher and be like, look, I spent my own money on this. You should definitely spend your money on me. Doesn't work that way. But it was one of those ones where I'd hired a few people, it was 15 people at the time, I think.
Wow.
Mixture of contractors as well as full-time. I remember the first time hiring someone full-time on PAYE, and that feeling of oh man, this is real now. This is really real. And, the accountant at the time who I was working with, they're my acting accountant. They had no idea about, the idea of starting and running a game studio. So they were like, we could do some element of PAYE, but you're going to have to do the paying. So every month I'd see my account just dwindle more and more and think, okay, is this really the thing? But I was really I was really driven to making it happen. And, I ended up, this was during COVID time. So we'd had a break from filming Raised by Wolves. And, I remember talking to EA, because a friend of mine who had interviewed me for Assassin's Creed Origins, he was working at EA. And he was like, can you just send me anything of what you're doing, material or anything? And I sent him some concept art and a blurb. And he had slipped that into the originals team's sort of, the EAP. And we ended up getting a meeting. And again, they were like, do you have a playable? I was like, what's a playable? They're like, okay, or a vertical slice. And I'm like, I don't know what a vertical, you could have told me horizontal slice, and I would have been in yeah, sure, whatever that is. But I told them this is what I wanted to do. I want to build a game that explores the journey of grief mechanically and, narratively, set within a world that was inspired by the stories that my father told me before he passed. And they got it, they really got it. And I think that's what really led to the inception and birth of Zao. Really, it was purely all from a place of honesty and wanted to share something that was real, rather than necessarily being like, oh yeah, let's just make a really cool game.
Well, you made a really cool game as well. Just that's the
thanks.
That's the byproduct, I guess.
Yeah.
So what does your day-to-day look like on that project? Because presumably you're also there's a bit of a slow down with COVID, I'm sure, when it came to in-person work, which acting is predominantly. But what did your day-to-day sort of look like from a creative direction standpoint? Are you sort of looking at work on a weekly basis? Are you writing?
Man, all the time. I'm doing everything, writing, being in the build, designing, trying to, even I wouldn't tell my artist this, but I was definitely, doing sketches and drawing stuff and then being like, can you make this look cool? And it's like a giant fish that, was supposed to be a bird. But I had many of those elements, and that stuff. So, but it was truly my job was to kind of get what was in here in my head and communicate it to the best way I can to the team. They react to it and give me something, and then I say whether it was right or not, or better, and 9 times out of 10 it was better, because again, these guys are experts in their field and they're brilliant at what they do. So that was really, really the job. At the same time, there is the business element, right? There is the getting insurance. There is the, ensuring that the tax is paid on time and making sure that contracts are up to date and, all this other stuff that I didn't think was part and parcel of it all was, talking to lawyers, talking to accountants, like it was a thing. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a real business.
This isn't my side hustle has become my main hustle,
Literally, man, literally. And, again, I think maybe because I'm an actor and I'm very used to sort of the idea of always being on. But like I was always, always available, always ready to chat, always ready to kind of connect and, change. Because a lot of the time, on film, you don't have time really to talk about the character and the journey and everything during filming. You have to do it after hours, dinner, or just, script work at home or at the studio or whatever. So, I was, because the studio is remote based and we're based all over the world, I could afford to essentially work from South Africa where I was filming. And every time I'd finish filming during the day, I would come back in the evening and just work at night and just, kind of do the, catch up with messages, come up with ideas. Even while I was on set as well, I'd be, doing the same thing. Like many a time I've sent weird videos in the silver suit to the team of like, I think the character should move like this. And, so yeah, it's been a very, very interesting journey. But like, yeah, it was a lot of the work was just overseeing and saying yes or no to things, but then also coming up with some cool ideas and tweaking, feeling the tweak of like either the movement or the combat or the, thinking about the music and communicating the music and all this, it was dabbling in all everywhere and anywhere, but also trusting the team, knowing full well that they knew what they were doing.
What's the aspect of the development part specifically that you think you went from knowing the least about to knowing more about? Like, was there any aspect that was particularly, you didn't realize how much work went into this?
Oh man. Shipping a game. And actually and the what's the word? It's gone from me probably because of trauma.
Passing cert, all that stuff.
Yeah, man. Oh my Lord. And then there's also the when you're having to optimize. Oh Jesus, optimizing, man. Oh my God. Like the realities of that and like what needs to be done in order to ensure that you're hitting the right frames per second in order to kind of, also make sure that the game passes cert on these different builds. One thing that will go wrong on the PlayStation doesn't go wrong on the Xbox. You figure that out. And then the Switch is just a different beast in its own. I don't even want to talk about the Switch. Love them, but just don't want to talk about them. But like it's, there is all these elements and factors that I had no idea about. Like I truly believe like what makes a game developer is shipping a game. Like that final moment that shapes anyone and everyone, because you learn so much about getting something out the door than you do when making it.
Now that the game's out and it's had its reception as well, how do you feel about it? How do you I was struck by just how great the game is, and I don't want to sound like that's I in a way I feel like I have to qualify that because the expectation was that I was expecting it not to when it first came out when I played it was because the Metroidvania space has gotten quite busy.
Yeah, so many.
There's so many of them, yeah. So to play something where I thought like the fluidity of the animations, the different mask systems, there was always something new happening, which I thought was like, it just felt like a game that a lot of game got stuffed into. To say nothing of the writing and the character design and stuff. So now that it's done, what are the parts that you're sort of like most proud of? Maybe that other folks on the team worked on as well, and then what are the parts that if you had more time or you could reallocate stuff, you would have maybe changed a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, Danny, man, like I gotta say, I really appreciate you saying that, man. Like you have no idea how lovely that is, especially you, man. Because I'm not gonna nerd out now, but No Clip means a lot to me, bro.
Oh wow, thank you so much.
It's like, no, truly, like the ins and outs of the industry and the game space it's so inspiring, like, to be like here now talking to you about this stuff, because whether you know it, you helped me a hell of a lot when it came to the ideas of what it means to be in the game space and learn about what it means to make a game. And I'm sure you've done that with many other people.
My goodness, thank you.
No, it's true, man. The fact that you said that you enjoyed our game, like, that means a lot, bro. So thank you. In regards to like the answering your question, I would change everything because that's who I am as an artist, and I would try and do everything differently. But no, I think the one thing that I'm super proud of is making a game in a studio or in a space where we've really valued one another. I think we've really strived and fought to try and not abuse or push each other to extremities. And because you always hear about like, oh, you need to crunch in order to, get like a great product out or do something right. And look, don't get me wrong. Like, I think, there were moments in time where we had to put in the extra effort, but we never asked like people to, lose sleep over it or to, to bleed for it, because what's the point in that, And in the same way that I feel like, I think the thing is, it's like we, and I want to continue doing this with the studio. I want to continue building this. It's making art responsibly rather than necessarily at the detriment of your own sanity. Like, someone could leave our studio tomorrow, for example, and want to venture into making games themselves, for example, and it was our studio that inspired them, and so that means that the practices that we did inspired them in order to do so and so and so and so. Because I feel like bad practice breeds bad practice, and I think like that is something that I'm quite chuffed and proud of the fact that we were able to wholesomely deliver a game, in an environment where normally you're told, no, you've got to be just ruthless. In regards to actually like, the game itself and changing bits, like, we had a lot of scope cuts, man. Like, there was a lot of elements of scope that we had to kind of, change and configure. And don't get me wrong, there are always painful moments where you're like, oh, but there was this moment here. Like, like when we started this process, I had paper designed, like, and also the designers as well. We'd got like 23 different types of enemies, right?
Right.
But again, with the budget we had, the team we had, the time we had, we just couldn't afford to put all 23 in. And one of the things that we hear a lot of is like, well, there's not that much enemy variety. And you're like, damn it! I know! So like, there's elements like that, but at the same time, again, the longer out of it all that we kind of get, the more I'm like, man, we actually shipped something. That's insane. So yeah, I'm just super proud that we were able to do that, man.
Just days after our interview, Abubakar's studio put out a message announcing that a dozen of the staff would have to be let go, citing difficult market conditions. The game was well received by critics, getting a 7 out of 10 from IGN and an 8 out of 10 from GameSpot, but in this competitive indie market, it may have struggled to sell enough copies to keep a dev team afloat in 2024. As of August 21st, the remaining team is still patching the game based on player feedback, and the studio says they're looking ahead to new projects. So, I mean, you've been through the ringer now once already. Is this something you want to continue to do? Is it something that does marry well with an actor's life, or can?
Yeah, I think it can. You got to make it. You got to make it work. I feel. I love it. I do love the creation process of it all. And look, don't get me wrong. I think like, I'm definitely a different man to from when I was like talking about the game before it launched, to launching the game, to then now being at the other end and being like, now we're gonna make another game. Like, I definitely feel that evolution, and I, in the sense of also being aware of like how audiences also take it, and like, players take it and everything. Like, it's a lot, but at the same time, I think the one thing that drives me with it and what I love about it all is the creation process, is also being in a position that can essentially affect change and make change in an industry that is still incredibly young and still ready to evolve and develop. Games as an art form, like there's in my eyes there's always space in my heart for games.
Massive thanks to Abubakar Salim for sharing his story with us. You can pick up Tales of Kenzera Zhao on Steam, Switch, PS5, and the various Xbox Series. Our thoughts with those developers who worked on the game who lost their positions. 2024 has been a tremendously difficult year for game studios, just like last year was, quite frankly. So many of the people in studios we've interviewed over the years have been affected, not the least Arcane Austin, which was completely shut down. It can be quite overwhelming trying to figure out what part NoClip can play in all of this. For the moment at least, we're dedicated to telling the human stories behind the games, be it here on Dear Dwyery or in our documentary work. Speaking of the crew, massive thanks to Jesse Garasha for producing this show, to you for listening to it, and for those of you who continue to rate and review our podcast feed. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another story from the world of video games. See you then.